So let us continue with algae. Algae deals with some sort of organisms, obviously, right? So we're going to get to know what are the types of organisms it deals with. This is the sentence given in the textbook. Basically meaning what are the features of the organisms that come under this. Now let us deal with them one by one. Okay. So they are chlorophyll bearing. Obviously they come under the plant kingdom, so they are chlorophyll bearing. But then there can be some exceptions also. Then we have their simple structures. They're thyroid, they're autotrophic, and they're largely aquatic. Now let us go into them one by one in very little detail, enough detail to understand it. Chlorophyll bearing, I hope it is understood that it means that they have the structure called as a chlorophyll, a chloroplast, that allows them to mobilize the sunlight to produce energy in the form of food. Right? Now simple meaning, it is a simple structure. Now thyroid, the vegetative structure of the algae is called as the thyroid. Okay, the thallus, it's like the body of it is called as the thyroid. Okay. The body is thallus, but then because it possesses the thallus as its body, it is called thalloid. Okay, it is thalloid. It possesses it. Now it is also autotrophic, which means it does not prey on other animals or it does not feed on anything else. It produces its food on its own, and they are largely aquatic. And now here one small thing to mention is they are either freshwater or they are marine. They are not specifically like, there is nothing like they are belonging to one particular sort of water type. No, they belong to both, but they are largely aquatic. Largely, okay. Now we can see that if they are largely aquatic, they have to do with something like moist, right? Moist on soil, wood. So why this has been mentioned? Because they are trying to tell us that they are able to adapt to variable habitat. Okay, variable habitat. So to tell why they belong to variable habitat, they can be found on stones or on soil or the wood structures in the forest or in any sort of places. Now this is the variable habitat. It's not restricted only to this. They can even be found in association. Association as in they are not singularly existing. They exist with some other organism. Okay. So now example is fungi. What I mean fungi is the algae and the fungi coexisting together. Now that is one example. This plus symbol, I'm trying to signify that the symbiotic or the co-relationship. Now the algae plus fungi relationship here, it is an organism that you might have heard of, that is lichen. Okay, so remember this example, algae, fungi, lichen. Okay, now one more, they can also be found in association with animals on their bodies or based on some other features. Now that one example would be of the sloth bear. Okay, the sloth bear. So now that we have understood that, let us go on further. So now let us get to know about the form and size of algae. The form and size, again here they are variable. Why they keep mentioning variable? Here when I say variable habitat, they dealt as to why it is variable, right? Similarly here also we are going to be dealing with as to why it is called as variable. Now for that we have few different sort of structures that has been mentioned in the textbook. The first one is colonial. The colonial meaning the structure is somewhat like this with different clusters together. Okay. Now a very simple example that I keep in mind is that of a custard apple, sitafal. With that fruit, if you have noticed, has different. It has like a very roughed up and a plumped up texture, right? It's like different parts coming together to form that fruit. Similarly, it's like different colonies, they come together and form that one big colony forming the organism. Now an example would be volvox. Please remember this, volvox. It has a colonial structure. Next example, next structure is filamentous. You might have heard of one example here, that is Spirodera. It has like filaments, different parts together and in a very thin structure like that, like this, somewhat like this. So again here the example, like I mentioned, you might have heard of in the lower classes would be Spirogyra. Now here you are going to have an extra example, that is Eulothrix. Okay, so next example is massive plant bodies. Okay, few organisms among them, they will cluster together and form massive plant bodies. Now an example for this would be kelp. Okay, the kelp, we are going to see one little sentence about it in the further context in the same chapter. Then we might get a better understanding of it. So if the structures, size and habitat and the definition is clear, let us move on to the reproduction under algae. Okay, now reproduction does not always restrict itself to sexual. Okay, it has, you know this, right? It has vegetative, asexual and sexual. So let us start with vegetative, then asexual and then sexual. So vegetative, we are going to deal with fragmentation here. Now what does fragmentation mean? An organism like this, it will fragment and it will go on to form the the thalloid. Okay, so that vegetative reproduction through fragmentation, those fragments, they will go on and they will form the thalloid. Thalloid being the vegetative body of the algae. So now we understood the reproduction method through fragmentation. Let us go on to the asexual method. Under asexual method, we are going to deal with asexual spores. Okay. So now these spores, asexual spores. So now these there are many types of spores. Okay, not under asexual spores we have many types of spores, but the one mentioned is zoospores. This does not mean there aren't any other spores, but we are dealing with zoospores here because it is one of the majority type of spores under this asexual reproduction used by algae. So what does zoo mean? Actually, it means that it is motile. So how is it motile? Like you, me, and everybody, the humans, we are motile because we have our feet, we stomp around, right? Similarly, they are motile because of an organ or a part of the body which is called as a flagella. Helps for motility. The structure is somewhat like, say, this is the body. Not necessarily always this is the case because you can see different structures here. Now, if it is like this, now because it is a water body here, we are going to take this like as a water body. Now, this is going to flap around, move around like this, somewhat like a wavy movement or something like that. Now, I'm just giving an example. It doesn't necessarily have to be only a wavy movement. I'm just letting you know how it is applicable in the motility part of the algae. So now if this is understood, let us go on to the sexual part. Now sexual reproduction again has been classified into three types. That is, first one is isogamous. Now you don't know what is sexual reproduction, right? In the case of humans, we know that male and female gamete, they come together and that fusion is going to give rise to the zygote embryo, further giving rise to a human baby. Similarly, we are going to deal with the same case under algae. So you got to know gametes. Now what does iso mean? Iso means same. And when I mean same here, I am referring to structure. So they are similar structure or size. So they are similar in size. Okay, so the gametes that fuse together to form the new organisms, they are similar in size. Now again, under this isogamous, we have two types. One is motile. The gametes are motile, and in the other one, the gametes are not necessarily motile. That is, they are immobile. Okay, so they are non-motile. So they are given examples for each. So please note them down. For motile, we have Eulothrix. And for non-motile, we have Spirogyra. Both of them are filamentous, true, but not both of them. And both of them reproduce sexually, true. Both of them reproduce with gametes having similar size, true. But both of them are not motile. Their gametes are not motile. Okay, so I hope you understood that. The gametes are not motile. Here the gamete is motile. Okay, so remember that. They have not mentioned anywhere that the organism itself is motile. Okay, since it's not mentioned here, we are not going to come to any conclusion. But remember, gamete is motile, gamete is non-motile, structure is filamentous. Now we will go to the next division under sexual reproduction, that would be anisogamous. Now if isogamous means same structure, anisogamous means different structures. Okay, they are variable in size. Now the example for this is Eudorina. So now you might be having a question, is there any more to it? Because we saw the same structure, we saw the different structure. So that must be it, right? There's actually another one, that is oogamous. Now this is somewhat similar to us humans also. Now we are going to deal with the oogamous. Now under oogamous, we are going to relate it with us humans itself. Humans, we have under the female gamete, we have a non-motile gamete, but a bigger one. And under male, we have the motile gamete, a comparatively a smaller one, right? Similarly, the same criteria applies here. So with this criteria in mind, we have few examples. That would be volvox, which we already mentioned under colonial structure, and another example which is not mentioned here yet, but it will be mentioned further, that is fucus. So I hope you understood the examples, the classification system under algae. Now next we are going to deal with the ecological importance of algae, where and all it is used, and how we can summarize all those various points in a list that is easy to understand. So now let us deal with the uses of algae. They are used in variety of ways. We will get to know each of them in a detailed manner. So firstly, I have mentioned all the points in a very brief manner here so that you can get to know when you see them. Okay, so when this term appears on the screen, you are able to understand that it has something to do with the carbon dioxide fixation, and all that you can make your short notes in the similar manner. So let us start with the first point, that is carbon dioxide fixation. because of their role in photosynthesis. As I mentioned in the beginning, in the definition of algae, we mentioned that they are chlorophyll bearing, right? So they photosynthesize. So because of this process, they are able to undergo this process of carbon dioxide fixation. And why it is mentioned specifically here is because they are involved in more than, or at least half of the carbon dioxide fixation going on in this planet right now. And also another function because of this process is the increase in the oxygen levels in the immediate environment of the algae. Like if there is an algae, because of this process of photosynthesis, we know that oxygen is a byproduct, right? So in the immediate environment, there is a flux of it extra, like it increases. So that is also an important point. Now, if this part is done, we will get to know about something that it has to do with the production, with the food. I have written here that the basis of food cycle. Now, why so? Not just because of the trivial fact that it is part of the plant kingdom. Yes, we know that plant kingdom deals with plants, obviously. And in most of the food webs or cycles that we see, we usually start sun and then we go to the producer, which is a plant, right? That is not the only basic reason. It is also because they are primary producers. Now that is a very important term when we write, because primary plays an important role, producers, that term also plays an important role. Now they are primary producers of they are of paramount importance, and also why they are of paramount importance? Because they are primary producers. And an important point is that they are involved in the production of energy-rich compounds. Now, this is a very important point and a very important term also, because if it weren't for these energy-rich compounds that were at the base, at the foundation, there is nothing that can go up ahead in the food cycle or the food web, right? So, they form the basis. Now, next we will go on to the point that we know that they are largely aquatic, and we know that they can be either freshwater or marine. So some of these marine algae, minimum 70 species of them, serve as food resources. Now an example for this would be laminaria and sargassum. Okay, so laminaria and sargassum are few examples, not the only examples. Why they are mentioned is because some marine algae, like around 70 species, they serve as food. The food resources. Now that's an important point. Where we got to know two examples, where we got to know a number, a numerical, and we also got to know the habitat and the function. So next point would be regarding hydrocolloids. Now hydrocolloid stands for water holding. Hydro, water. Colloid is something that has a suspension in it. It's like a liquid with a suspension. So this is used to explain the term water holding substance. Okay, so why they have mentioned this here? Because there are some examples of brown and red algae. Now what are brown and red algae? They are the classification under algae. We have three types: green, brown, red. Phaeophagia, chlorophagia, rhodophagia. We have those examples. Chlorophagia is the green algae, Phaeophagia is the brown algae, rhodophagia is the red algae. Now we will go about that later, but for now remember, some brown and red algae have this feature of hydrocolloid in them. Now the example would be algin and carrageen. So now carrageen is in red algae, while algin is in brown algae. Okay, so please remember that algin and carrageen, they are important terms. They are water holding substances in brown and red algae. Now we have this another term, agar. Agar is a jelly substance. It is acquired from organism like Gelidium or Gracilaria. Now they both belong to the red algae classification, and not just that. Why they are mentioned about agar is because it has an important function. Now what is a function? It is used to grow microbes. It is used to grow microbes, and it forms like a medium or a suspension to grow it. That's what I mean by that. And also it is used in the formation or in the preparation or production of ice creams or jellies because of their natural jelly-like nature. Okay, so they are used for the production of these condiments or different types of things. That is from agar. Now the last thing I mentioned, chlorella. Now chlorella is an example of algae. Now why I mentioned chlorella is because it has a unique property in the fact that it is rich in protein. So it being rich in protein, it is able to it is able to behave as a food supplement. You might have heard of some people, due to some sort of condition, they are advised to have protein supplements, or some people take protein supplements based on their own knowledge. You might have heard of this. Now this is a natural source of it. It is rich in protein. Now where is this used? A real life example would be a very beautiful example. The space travelers. Now these space travelers, they use these chlorella, which are rich in protein, as food supplements. Now, that would be its function and its use, right? Let us see one term that describes its structure and its characteristics as an individual. That would be that it is unicellular. Now, this is very important because they might ask in exam that is they will not ask directly whether chlorella is unicellular or multicellular, but they can ask in a way that they'll give you a few examples and they might ask you whether the following organisms are unicellular or which of the following organisms are unicellular or multicellular. So in those examples, remember chlorella is unicellular. Okay. So now I would like to mention one last thing. This is actually not mentioned in the textbook, but it is equally important in the fact that it has been asked in exams. The point being that the life cycle followed by algae is haplontic. Haplontic life cycle. Now, I'm not going to mention what it is in detail here now, but please remember that algae usually follows a haplontic life cycle. Now, is there any exception? Yes, there is. When I was discussing about ooze animals under the sexual reproduction, I mentioned an example, right? Volvox and fucus. Fucus actually has a diplontic method. I'm going to write it here in this box. Fucus is diplontic. It follows a diplontic life cycle, the reproduction, but algae follow a haplontic life cycle. Please make note of it. Although it is not mentioned in the textbook, there's a chance that they might ask about these life cycle, because we are able to, without this term, we are understanding their life cycle. If you get what I mean, that without using the term haplontic, we are discussing about their life cycle and how it reproduces, right? So with that knowledge, we must be able to give it a term, and that term would be haplontic here. But in fucus, the case being an exception, it would be diplontic. So now let us continue with the three different types of algae. That would be Chlorophyceae, Phaeophyceae and Rhodophyceae. Now we'll start with Chlorophyceae.